How many of you have children? How many of you have learned very profound things from your children? And wasn't that one of your biggest surprises in life? Well, what I'm going to talk about today was a gift from one of my children. About 8 months ago, I had dinner with my daughter and her boyfriend, both in their mid-20s. Both have great jobs in the city. Together have household income of about $250,000, no kids, not married. And I said to them, what do you do by way of investing your money? And they said, oh, we work with our friends and our group at work, and we're deciding to invest $2,500 every month in startup companies. And by the time we're 50, we hope to have hundreds of companies in our portfolio. And we know most of them are going to be a bust, but we know that some of them are going to be great opportunities, kind of like our own venture fund. So I said, really? How do you do this? Oh, they said we go on crowdfunding platforms and we make investments. We're accredited investors, and that's how we do it. And all of our development friends at work do the same thing. So we invest, and that's the way we hope to do it. We don't have to pay commissions and broker fees to all of our middlemen and our financial advisors. And then I said, wow, there's something here that I know nothing about because I'm old. So clearly, I need to study this and understand it. So as a result, I've spent the last 8 months learning about equity crowdfunding. So really, what you're seeing here is a revolution and the democratization of capital, where access both for money into companies and for companies to seek investments from little investors is really at its beginning. And what you can see is in this whole thing about investment, only about 4% of the US population has had any access to startup companies and the ability to invest capital. So there are a bunch of companies that all of you know. And what have they all done? They've created platforms to democratize their business. And I think what you're seeing here is the federal government giving people the ability to invest money in startup companies where they never would have had that ability before, small amounts of money. And in turn, it allows companies to have yet another option to raise money. How did this all start? Well, in 2012, the administration and Congress passed the Jobs Act, which now gave us the ability to raise money from individual people. Really, none of this became real until 2014 when the commission issued rules on how that was done. And this really only started at the very end of 2015. So we're basically a year into this, 18 months at the most. So this is very new. Only several hundred companies have gone through this process and raised money in this space. What are the facts? Well, one, there are $7.3 trillion hiding in self-directed IRAs, a main source of funding for this. People can take their IRA accounts and now drive them towards companies. Millennials are 10 times more likely, my daughter and her boyfriend, to invest in crowdfunding platforms than most of us sitting in this room. $1 billion was raised in 2014, $2.5 billion raised in 2015. This year is expected to be about $4 billion. Now, those numbers seem small and pale in comparison to traditional forms of capital formation, but as you can see, it's growing. And again, it's not intended to replace what's there. It just creates another set of options. There are 9.5 million high net worth individuals, and 74% of these crowdfunding investors are your kids between the ages of 25 and 49. Now let's talk about the types. There are really two basic ones. You all know the Reg D. You all raise money on Reg D. It's how private companies raise money today. That's 506B. This is a 506C offering, which allows you to raise money from individual people, both accredited and non-accredited investors. So that's what's key here. There's a requirement that you have a private placement memorandum. Most of you know that the current rules are such that we raise money because we raise money from people who are known or introduced to us. This allows you to generally solicit, advertise for funds, whereas previously it was illegal for you to put up a thing on your website that said, investors, click here. Now you can do that if you file through the 506C process. The main type is what's called Reg A, and there are two levels of Reg A. There's Tier 1, where you can raise up to $20 million. You've got to file audited financials and an offering circular with the commission. That offering circular needs to be reviewed and authorized, and you can raise up to $20 million every year. The key thing about Reg A is think of it as a light public company offering. You become a public business enterprise, allowing you to take in public investors, and solicit for investment. So remember, that word solicitation is key because according to the Securities Act, you cannot solicit for investors. Broker-dealers can do that, but you can't. But now with these new rules, companies can solicit. So you can raise up to $20 million a year through this Tier 1 offering. You have to comply with blue sky rules unless you submit audited financials. There's Tier 2 offering. You can raise up to $50 million every 12 months. Again, you have to file both audited and offering circular with the SEC. It needs to be reviewed and authorized by the SEC, and then you post your offering on a platform. If you do a Tier 2 offering, there is a federal exemption from all of the blue sky filings. One other thing that's important here is something called Test the Waters right here. What Test the Waters does, it allows you to post on a platform without the audits and the formal filings, which means you can determine whether there's adequate interest. Think of it as soft circling to be able to make your book. So here's how the process works. You conduct a feasibility study, you develop a campaign brief, you build the campaign components just as you would for a Kickstarter campaign, you post on a crowdfunding platform, you conduct the audit and the filings, and then you can start to take in money. Pretty simple process, hard to do. A lot of benefits here. One of it is you can set your own terms. You're accessing a much larger pool of investors. You're able to increase your brand equity because you're promoting generally to the public. You retain control of the company. You can, this is a way for you to maintain control. Set your own terms and valuation. One of the interesting examples is a company called Elio Motors, a company that didn't have a product, won't have a product till 2021. They make a three-wheeled car. They raised $18 million at a pre-money valuation of over $350 million. Now, that's an example of how this can go awry on YouTube, but it's an example of how people have been successful in raising money in this fashion. And you can attract additional sources of capital. So a lot of people see this as a way to augment the way they raise money. Pretty simple process. You do this marketing material, you launch it, you receive indications of interest. Think of those of you who have taken a company public, it's the making the book part. And then you're able to take down those investments once you have an authorized offering from the SEC. The timeline, think of it as 5 to 7 months. You spend the bulk of it in the middle where you're promoting it and you're listing it on a platform for people to invest. There's a beginning part where all the hard work is done, where you're actually creating all of the materials and posting the page. The last part's simple, it's where you're collecting money. There's been a lot of successes in fundraising. There are two big categories. Real estate. Real estate has been a wildly successful category, lots of them. Those of you who listen to the radio know a company called Rich Uncles. Rich Uncles is a crowdfunded REIT. They've raised $200 million in the last 3 years for their model. Consumer products that have high proof of adoption or a high-minded social objective have been very successful. I talked about Elio Motors. Small investors are investing not because they've done deep due diligence, it's because they believe in what you do. Think of it as Kickstarter, but for equity. What are my general learnings now that I've been doing this for a while? It's not easy. A lot of people think, oh, great, now I have an ATM. No, it doesn't quite work like that. It's not that easy. It takes a lot of effort and work, and really marketing is the key driver here. You have to know how to promote your offering to potential investors. The average investment in a REG A crowdfunding is $2,700. My daughter and her boyfriend, $2,500 a month. Early success is critical, so most people who succeed bring their own investors to their fund, so by the time they even launch their crowdfunding raise, they've got about a third of it already raised. So that's a critical fact. Again, you can't see this as separate from your traditional fundraising effort, but rather a way to integrate your traditional fundraising effort and expand your base. Choosing the right crowdfunding platform is critical and very key to success. There are several dozen of them out there. Very few are successful today, and they're all focused on a particular segment of the market, so that's critical. And you've got to set reasonable terms for your investment, because if you don't, two things happen. You may not raise the money, and worse, you may mess up subsequent rounds of funding. Thank you.